Hey, unfortunately, I ran out of time in the last video about toxic masculinity and what that is perceived to be. I touched a bit on culture wars. I touched a bit on the importance of defining masculinity in the first place, and I think that is very much down to it's a subjective thing. Um, and so is this. But I want to talk a bit about, I guess, more on the side of toxic masculinity. Let me make a proposition. I would suggest that toxic masculinity is machismo more than masculinity. Now, we hear this term, particularly from feminist circles, and it's very often linked to such social movements as the Me Too movement, and it's kind of seen as a rejection of this hyper masculine persona. And feminists and others argue that this is bad for society, it's bad for men and boys to follow this. Now, I actually do agree with that to an extent. What I disagree with is that masculinity itself is a negative thing. So, just because a man or a boy is interested in traditional masculine things doesn't mean he's going to grow up to be a hyper machismo sort of guy. And I think that's a mistake that the feminists are making. They're assuming that masculinity equals machismo. There is a difference. There's a big difference. And it's almost like, again, I touched a bit on how I felt that traditional gender roles are now almost becoming the revolutionary thing. You know, feminine women and masculine men is almost a revolutionary thing because we've got so tied up, and you see this in Hollywood, with what is traditional and what is politically correct. How does this conform to identity politics? How does this tick the boxes? You know, this character is too feminine, and it's particularly aimed at women. I'm going to be maybe addressing that in another video, but let's just focus on toxic masculinity here, machismo. I've been on trains, right, where you get on and a group of drunk guys and some women as well. And actually, I think where women exhibit these personality traits, we say in the UK ladette behaviour, i.e., aggressive, swearing loudly, etc. Get plenty of women who do that. It's not that they're being empowered by acting the same as men because they're replicating the worst sort of men. So any feminist that says, "Oh well, that's fine," a woman getting drunk and swearing and being aggressive is empowerment. That's delusional. How is that empowerment? All that is doing is copying the worst sort of men. I don't see that as empowerment at all. Um, so this sort of behavior, like throwing your weight around, getting drunk, throwing your weight around, that's definitely can be perceived as toxic masculinity. Um, and it's not a good thing at all. Then you get bullying in the armed forces. I think that's still a very serious problem. It really angers me when people kind of dismiss this as, oh, well, it's a tough profession. They need to, it's a training technique. I understand if it's uniform. I understand if the same thing is done to everyone. But more often than not, that sort of bullying is targeted at an individual. That's where I take issue with it. I think you get it in the armed forces. I think you get it in the emergency services, probably in the police and the fire service. And this is not smearing any of these brave people. It's just a recognition that this is a problem. And I know it's a problem because you can see testimonies of people who've been through this and they've now left the services. I just don't agree with the logic that, oh, if we haze this guy, that's going to make him a better soldier. That's bullshit, to put bluntly. It just that makes no sense. Um, so I really, really think the armed forces need to purge that. You know, it's not a normal job. I think, of course, it can be disciplined, it can be tough and robust, and you don't want shrinking violets in that sort of job. But that sort of individualistic, targeted bullying, I don't see anything honourable about that or pragmatic. Um, I recently saw a post that bugged me a little bit. And this was coming from a guy who is, he fits the bill of absolute ultra masculine. This guy's an MMA fighter, like, big guy, bald head. He looks like he could be a doorman, very tough guy. And he had this post saying, bullying is a problem, but we need to teach children to stand up for themselves. Now, and then he followed up, we're far too sensitive nowadays. I sort of see where he's coming from, and there is obviously a problem with overt sensitivity. But I think you could go to the other extreme. And how do you tell a child who is being bullied by a gang to stand up for themselves? That's ridiculous. I mean, no individual, no matter how brave or self confident, can stand up to a gang. So that's just bad advice. It's just not sensible. Um, and you see these guys who cannot leave other people alone. I'll give an example from a film, Creed. Right, there's a scene, if you've seen the film, where the character Adonis Creed is going to a nightclub where his girlfriend's putting on a performance, and he has this kind of exchange with a rapper who knew his father. And at first, it's quite pleasant. The guy gets his autograph. He's an up and coming fighter. He gets his autograph. But then he keeps calling him Baby Creed. Adonis Creed takes issue with this. Now, instead of just apologizing and saying, "Oh, sorry, man," the guy continues to do it. And then the situation gets out of hand and there's a fracas and he ends up in prison. But the point here is that scene affected me a little bit because it is real to society. You get this on both sides of the Atlantic. You know, I've had a lot of situations where I've been walking past minding my own business and some guy just shouts something out. And it could be someone's hair color, it could be their weight, it could be their ethnicity. There's something seriously wrong with people that cannot leave other people alone and they think it's banter. It really angers me that, you know, there are guys in society, and it almost always is guys who do this. It's okay, sometimes teenage girls, but there is something particularly pathetic about that. And I think, in terms of toxic masculinity, we need to get away from this thing that treating people like dirt makes you a cool guy, it makes you a tough guy. It doesn't. Okay, I'm not going to say let's all be brothers and get on with each other. There are men I dislike. There are men I do not respect, and I really don't respect them. And I'll be true to my word. I will say candidly what I think of them. But as a base principle, I give everyone the benefit of the doubt if I meet them. If I meet someone, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and I'll be civil towards them. And I think that's a practical way to go. That's just me. You can disagree. If there's something about the personality I discover or I find I dislike, then I'm not going to be fake. I won't pretend to be their best friend. But I think masculinity, it's not about left wing or right wing. And I've seen some nonsense surveys saying left wing men are supposed to be less masculine. That's a lot of nonsense. I mean, if that's the case, would you really describe, trade union men, miners, shipyard workers? Would you call those guys not masculine? That's so. Let's just get away from that. Masculinity has got nothing to do with left and right wing. That's just a nonsense argument. It's pseudoscience. Um, Masculinity, I think, is more a personal thing. It's about how you conduct yourselves with others. It's about what you feel it is in yourself. I know what my masculinity is. I think it's a personal thing. And I don't have to answer to any feminist or any other man what that is. I'm not going to say I'm always super confident. I'm not. That's something I'm developing. But I think the way to confront toxic masculinity is, first of all, taking the masculinity out of it. That's not masculinity, that's machismo, right? So when feminists say, oh, it's toxic masculinity, we need to say, no, actually, that's just machismo. This does not represent every man who's in touch with his masculine side. And whilst it's not my position to tell any other guy how to lead his life, I think that those of us who feel that there is something fundamentally decent about masculinity, it's responsibility, it's standing up for people weaker than ourselves. This is what being a man is about. And again, I'm not saying that's a rigid gender thing. It's not like, oh, you have to be a soldier, you have to be a boxer, etc. Incidentally, in the boxing world, I would say there's a lot of machismo in there that goes beyond masculinity. I've always respected fighters who I think demonstrate the best of masculinity, guys like Manny Pacquiao, the Klitschko brothers. But there is a lot of machismo as well. There's a lot of pathetic name calling. This guy's a tomato can, that guy's a card, this guy's a runner, which was levelled at Mayweather. And whilst I certainly wouldn't hold up Mayweather to be a good personification of masculinity, that's a ridiculous criticism. It is. The sport is hit and don't get hit. It's not a street fight. But I think the best way to preserve masculinity is not by pandering to feminists, and it's not by giving these guys who personify toxic masculinity, yobs, thugs, men who brutalize women, bullies. These people are not ideal men. So those of us who believe in good masculinity need to reclaim it in a sense. It's a bit like reclaiming national flags from racists, right? So I love the Union flag. And it sickens me when I see blood and soil nationalists abusing it. It's just my opinions. Let me know your thoughts. Male or female, what do you think of this? This is just my views. I think the best way to really personify masculinity, it's not by a particular job, it's not even by a certain personality, it's about more to do with belief system, I think. And I'll close there.